Okay, the Georgia Bulldogs getting news tonight. They moved up in the college football playoff rankings. I've still got plenty to say about this. This has just happened just now. I really, I think a lot of things for the committee is this has turned out to be pretty good for them. They're very fortunate that some of these games have broken the way they have, because some of their rankings in the past have made no sense. I still am just completely perplexed as to why Penn State is number 4. But there are some other things here that you're just, I mean, to be honest with you, I would probably have Georgia at 4. And here's why. I certainly wouldn't have Penn State. But there's no explanation for Miami being in front of Georgia. I think if you want to say Notre Dame should be the 4, I'll listen to that for sure. I think Notre Dame has played well, but Georgia's got wins over number 12, number 3, and number 8. No one else has anything close to that. They say, well, they've got losses to number 13 and 14. So, I mean, who else has played this? This is crazy. Now, the good news for Georgia is, and I think there's a lesson to be learned here, which is never eliminate yourself from the direct path. You want to play in the SEC championship game every year. This is there, and I think in the near future we're going to see the SEC and the Big Ten. They're the power brokers here. Okay, the two commissioners of those leagues are going to make it to where they're not going to participate in the college football playoff after a while. They will warn their brethren in the media world. They're not going to do it if they don't have their top 2 teams in guaranteed. Because why does that make a difference? Well, then the conference championship game has serious value. If you don't have that, then you have a mess on your hands like you do. What is Clemson's motivation for playing in the ACC championship? Let me put this on the screen real quick. Oop, well, it's not going to show me. Wow, that's a little bit surprising. So let's just go through this real quick. So Oregon, Ohio State 1 and 2. Those should be the top 2. And then after that, you got Texas at 3, Penn State at 4, Notre Dame at 5, Miami at 6, Georgia at 7. Tennessee basically has to win at Vanderbilt, and they will play in the college football playoff. Whether they will host or not, we still have a long way to go. They definitely should be in front of Indiana. That is no longer. I mean, the stupidity of the Indiana thing is at least somewhat behind us now. But you see Clemson sitting there at 12. I mean, what happens if Clemson beats South Carolina, does not play for the ACC championship, and then, I don't know, Notre Dame loses or Penn State loses, which they won't. Notre Dame could. Or Georgia loses to Tech. That doesn't really solve your problem. Tennessee loses to Vanderbilt. There's a lot of paths all of a sudden for Clemson. And, they're not in right now. But, I got to say, that is an amazing situation, because this committee clearly has either not been watching, or we're just kind of running out of teams at this stage, which I think is a lot of it. Now, again, for the Dawgs, what we're talking about is a direct path, and you really want the direct path. And the direct path is, you beat Georgia Tech, but that is not a mandatory thing. But you go and you play against A&M or Texas, and you win that game, and you will probably be the 2 seed. Okay, and if you're the 2 seed, well, whether you win, whatever seed, they will be mandated. They must play in the Sugar Bowl at that point. I got to say, I don't think the SEC champion would ever be the 4 seed. So you're looking at a situation where, if you win against Texas or at Texas A&M, all you have to do at that point is you get 3 weeks off. It's really critical to win that game. I think they should win that game. I think they probably will win that game. If they don't, makes things more complicated for them. Doesn't mean they can't still win the national championship. It just means the path is a lot longer. What we don't know, and what I'm not even going to pay attention to the seedings right now, because they're just going to change. I mean, penciling Texas in as the SEC champion, I mean, Georgia will be favored in that game. Now, I don't know by how much, but they'll be favored either slightly against Texas or relatively significantly, like a touchdown against Texas A&M. We don't know who's going to win the ACC. We don't know if SMU is going to be in this thing, or Clemson, or Miami. I mean, I'm telling you right now, the most curious situation is Clemson. And South Carolina is not going to get in the college football playoff. but they could make things very bad for their foes. I mean, I think for Carolina to get in would be like some sort of thing like a week ago, an absolute inside straight. But they got to beat Clemson, which they're an underdog. So, but I have to let me just step back and talk about this for a second. Right now, Clemson is not in this thing because the Big 12 champion has to go in. So if at the end of the day, you're talking about a top 12 that is the Big 12 champion plus Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Miami, Tennessee, SMU. I don't know if both those teams will get in or not. I don't know. Miami or SMU, Indiana, Boise State, and then the Big 12 champion, who I'm going to imagine would be Arizona State, but we'll see. They're playing the best of everybody out there. Look, this is going to come down to Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, and Oregon. No one else in this thing should really have any. There should be no fear in any way of playing Penn State. It would be difficult to go up there and play, or playing Notre Dame, or Miami. I mean, Miami would not. Miami would have a monumental task on their hand beating this Georgia team because they're not disciplined. They are all over the place. Tennessee, Georgia's beaten Tennessee. Georgia's beaten Texas. One on the road, one at home, both by double digits, both by 2 scores. I think one by 14 and one by 15. So, and then Indiana, I mean, Georgia would smash Indiana's head into the ground, I think. Boise State, I don't see it. And of course, they beat Clemson already this season. I don't know that I don't know that a matchup will be different. It could possibly be different with Texas because if Texas's offensive line plays well or plays better, then But I think Texas is in a must-win situation here. I think they are in a must-win situation Saturday night, but we'll just see. But the winner of South Carolina Clemson is all of a sudden looking hard the rest of the weekend, like the rest of that day. Like as soon as that game's over at 3:30, those teams are going to want to know what happened. What's going to happen with Texas and Texas A&M? Let's immediately turn on the USC Notre Dame game. What's happening with Tennessee Vanderbilt, which is going to be playing at the same time. So this is the intrigue of the expanded playoff. If we were in the old school situation, Georgia would have to beat Texas to get into the top 4. It'd be hard to say that they belong because you still have Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Notre Dame all with 1 loss. Miami. If I had to guess, Miami's going to eat a loss one of these next 2 weeks, but we'll see. But like for Georgia, like this can still turn out really well for them. Even I wouldn't say even if they lose, but like if you beat Tech on Friday night, you're in the playoff. It's a matter of where are you in the playoff. And I cannot justify Miami being in front of Georgia if Georgia beats Georgia Tech. But I know these guys have done a really bad job so far, and I don't think that's going to change. They're taking the least, they got a gift this weekend, being able to have them shuffle out Alabama and Ole Miss, to be able to kick Indiana back as far as they can. They didn't do it all the way, so Indiana's going to be in the playoff. Tennessee's going to be in the playoff. There's several teams that are going to lock themselves in this weekend. Penn State have the capability to. Penn State. Oregon and Ohio State, I think, almost certainly are already in. Okay? Penn State, Notre Dame, and Tennessee can lock themselves in, and so can Indiana. So, like, half the field is going to be settled by rivalry weekend. And then you have, this sort of curiosity of the SEC, although I think Texas and Georgia are probably in. But what happens if Texas A&M gets there? What happens in the ACC? I have no idea. What happens in the Big 12? Like, you can see Boise. No, you're not hosting. Excuse me. You're going on the road. You're not getting a bye into the big. You're not getting a bye to the Fiesta Bowl. They are going to jump Arizona State over you some way or another. I don't know what excuse or explanation or whatever it will be. But if you're Georgia, again, getting back to this, if you are Georgia and you have the capability of playing in the Sugar Bowl as what you'd be the 2 seed, that means that you're going to be playing the winner of the 7-11. So in this case, this is not going to be how it would wind up because Georgia's a 7. But like Georgia would be playing probably somebody like either the winner of Tennessee, Boise State, or like Notre Dame, maybe not Notre Dame, but like Penn State, Notre Dame. Somebody's got to be the 7. Like someone's got to kick. Ohio State will, let's just say Ohio State will be the 5. That kicks Penn State to the 6. That kicks Notre Dame to the 7. If Notre Dame, that's probably not going to change. I think an SEC team hosting is the loser. Possibly is the loser of the SEC championship game, and I think that team would have to be Texas to host. I thought the SEC would host. It's looking like they will not host any games again second week, because I think if it's Georgia that loses, they will go on the road. If it's Texas that loses, then yeah, they'd probably host in Austin. But the the Big Ten runner-up is going to be the 5 seed. The 6 seed and then it will just fall in line. The 6 seed will probably be in Penn State. The 7 seed will probably be Notre Dame. And those guys are not going to get buys, so they're going to have to win out. And if you're Georgia and you say we get the winner of either Penn State, Boise, or Notre Dame, and the ACC runner-up. Oh my God, in the Sugar Bowl, you'd be dying to play that game. And then you would get the winner then, probably in Miami. You'd either get the winner of the ACC championship game or whoever survives, not the winner, the ACC championship winner who gets the first round, the 3-team pod there, which would be the ACC, would be the top seed, which in this scenario would be Miami. I don't know if it will wind up being Miami, but I think this could really work out well for Georgia getting to the semifinals. When you get to the semifinals, as usual, it gets really hard. That's when it gets really hard. Okay? But if you're the 2, you avoid the 1. You're facing the 3 and their quadrant. The screwy part about this, and this has got to get changed, is that the 1 could eventually play. So the Big Ten champion could wind up playing in the semifinal against the Big Ten runner-up, and that's not right. Not in the semifinal. Well, it could be the semifinal. Excuse me. So the 4-5. Is Ohio State really going to have a hard time with Arizona State, or whoever emerges from the Arizona State? No, they're not. I mean, they shouldn't. Not the way Ohio State looks to me. So I think, this can line up really well for Georgia. But they've got to take care of their business these next 2 weeks, which they should. They're a 3-touchdown favorite over Tech. The Tech game, as soon as it's over, whether they win or lose, the entire focus will be the SEC championship game immediately. And they get that extra day. So they get the spotlight of ABC, and then they get the extra day. It's a huge win for Georgia, but you need to win the game, okay? And then you've got get the extra day and a little bit, to be honest with you, because of the A&M Texas matchup being so late. That it's basically a day though, because they're both kicking off at 7:30. So, but Georgia's not traveling like Texas is. That's not a huge travel game, but it's enough. So, I think this could wind up, and you're playing the SEC championship game in Atlanta at the Dome. So there's a lot going their way. Namely, the offense is picking up. It's starting to look good. The defense, Georgia's really banged up, no question. But so is Texas. And to be honest with you, so is Texas A&M, and so is Tech. I mean, if Haynes King does not play against Georgia, or he cannot play in a functional way, that's not the Georgia Tech that he's their better quarterback. Now, the young kid from Athens is good. He is good from Oconee, whatever. But, he's really good. But there was a reason, and has been a reason, they've been going with Haynes King when they can. He's a starter for a reason. If he can't go, that's going to make it hard for Tech. And it's going to be hard enough for Tech. Okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat this thing. I mean, you're talking about 19.5 point. That's 3 scores. So, this is going to be difficult for Georgia Tech. But if Georgia doesn't tackle well, they did not tackle well against UMass. If they do not tackle well, this is going to be a long night. Now, all you got to do is win against Tech, and you are almost certainly in the playoff, okay? But you want to better your situation as much as possible. Look at Penn State. They are terrible. They lost the only game that matters. They survived Minnesota. I mean, I would be very curious to see where Penn State is right now. They're not going to lose to Maryland. They almost lost to Minnesota. Had they lost that game, I guess they'd still be in it. I don't know why. I mean, Penn State is a fraud, and I'm not the only one saying that. I think everybody thinks that that's the case, and it just what it is. But, I would be very – I mean, some of these teams just do not have the firepower. Some of these teams are not consistent in any way. Most of the teams in college football are not consistent. Most teams don't have firepower. Penn State does not, okay? Penn State, I don't know if Penn State has scored a lot of points this season. Notre Dame has played better. I'm not talking about Notre Dame in a derogatory way the way I am about Penn State. Okay, notice there is a difference. But, like, when you look at Penn State, like, this is going to catch up with them at some point. They scored 30 against West Virginia on the road, 30 against Bowling Green, 56. And then they get into conference play. They've only scored over 30 three times. One of those was against Purdue. Purdue is horrible. So they scored 33, but that was in overtime. They scored that was against USC. They scored 35 against UW, and they scored 49 against Purdue. This is not a good offense. This is not an offense where you're sitting there going, wow, that's a well-oiled machine. They scored 21 against Illinois. They scored 27 against UCLA at home. They're terrible. UCLA is terrible. They scored 28 on the road against Wisconsin, but that was a knife fight. They only managed 13 at home against Ohio State. That game was not close. Looked close, was not close. Then they played two just not good teams, particularly Purdue. I mean, there's just nothing to be scared about there unless you go and turn the ball over and all this stuff. There's some of these teams are not great. Now, Georgia's problem's been turnovers, particularly from Carson Beck. Carson Beck's not had turnovers lately. He's not had turnovers since, I think, Florida. So that's coming on a month ago now. I mean, the Ole Miss game, he's not out there throwing interceptions. He got a fumble for a strip. Not the same thing to me. So, Georgia's cleaned it up on offense. They're scoring a lot more points. They scored 30 against the Gator. I mean, just as an aside, Georgia's been consistent on offense with the exception of the Ole Miss game. They scored 30 against Clemson, 48, 13 against Kentucky, bad, 34 against Bama, 31 against Auburn, 41 against State, 30 against Texas, 34 against Florida, 10 against Ole Miss, 31 against Tennessee, 59 against UMass. You think they're going to score fewer than 30 points against the Jackets? I don't. So they are showing consistency, particularly in league play or against Power 5 schools. They've scored 30 against everybody except Kentucky and Ole Miss. So I think, Notre Dame's playing better. Miami's not. So there's all sorts of things. This could work out really well for Georgia. Now, I think particularly well if they win the league and they go and play the Sugar Bowl. But that's not the only path. There's multiple ways to do this now, but a win over Tech is mandatory, or it's all on the line against Texas. Thanks for watching.